Least we forget George Remus. In 1919, the 18th Amendment, also known as the Volstead Act, was passed and outlawed the manufacture, sale, transport, and distribution of liquor. Lawmakers did not anticipate the immediate rebellion that led to bootlegging and speakeasies across the country. The controversial life story of George Remus is a prominent example of how an intelligent and ambitious defense attorney in Chicago became tempted by wealth and seduced by greed. Later known as the "King of Bootleggers" and deemed Prohibition's evil genius, George Remus manipulated the pharmaceutical industry and exploited loopholes in the Volstead Act in order to mastermind an extremely profitable business in selling illegal liquor. Even today, his provocative story of lawlessness, betrayal, and loss can be found in numerous present-day movies and books. It is also the inspiration for numerous distilled whiskey bourbon products sold across the country. George Remus was born in Germany on November 13, 1876, to Frank and Maria Remus. In 1882, his family immigrated to the United States. For a brief period, they lived in Baltimore before moving to Milwaukee and eventually settled in Chicago in the mid-1880s. At 14 years of age, George began working as a clerk in a drugstore that was owned by his uncle. His ongoing ambition led him to enroll in the Chicago College of Pharmacy, and at the age of 19, he passed the state exam and received his pharmacist's license. At 21, he bought his uncle's drugstore and 5 years later attained another one and created the Remus Pharmaceutical Company. During this time, he met Lillian Clough, who he married in 1899. 9 months later, they had a baby girl named Romola Remus. According to the novel The Bourbon King, George wanted to achieve even more, so he started attending law school. In 1900, George was admitted to the Illinois Bar Association and began practicing in Chicago as a trial defense attorney in 1901. In 1914, George Remus gained notoriety as a defense attorney in the William Cheney Ellis murder trial. All signs pointed to the death penalty for Ellis, but Remus created a creative defense strategy of pleading guilty of murder by reason of insanity. Ultimately, his strategy worked and Ellis was only sentenced to 15 years in jail. As stated in The Bourbon King, this court case would forever affect the legal system and give defense attorneys the ability to focus on the medical or scientific aspect of a temporary insanity plea for their clients. Although George's law practice was thriving, not all was copacetic within his marriage. Remus soon began an affair with Augusta Imogen Holmes. Remus's wife, Lillian, found out through gossip newspaper articles and was granted a divorce. In 1920, George and Imogen got married in Kentucky. The Volstead Act had George defending more and more clients with liquor law violations. He saw how wealthy these clients were from their practices and became intrigued himself. With his experience as a defense attorney, Remus studied the Volstead Act and successfully found loopholes. It stated that if a person had a physician's prescription, it was legal for them to purchase liquor for medicinal purposes. By manipulating this loophole as a licensed pharmacist himself, Remus could acquire and sell alcohol legally by creating his own supply and distribution network that dealt with wholesale quantities. To help, he also purchased and created his own drug companies. When he decided to plant his operation in Cincinnati, his company flourished. As his company grew, he had law enforcement and politicians in his pocket, as well as over 3,000 workers and whiskey runners on his payroll. This allowed him the sense of insulation from the law. At one point, his business encompassed 9 states, including Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, New York, Ohio, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania. During this time, George and Imogen relished in their wealth and hosted elaborate parties. Many of these parties had live orchestras, champagne, and rare wines. Men left with gifts of diamond stick pins, and women left with gifts of diamond earrings. George Remus's extensive and illegal business dealings caught the attention of law enforcement not on his payroll and worked its way up the chain of command to the U.S. Assistant Attorney General. He was soon charged and sentenced to a maximum of 2 years in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. Before his stay, he assigned power of attorney to Imogen, as he fully trusted her. While he was in prison, Imogene began having an affair with another man, to which they slowly liquidated most of Remus's assets for their own profit. When Remus got out of prison, he came home to divorce papers and an isolated mansion. Remus began plotting his revenge, and in 1927 he shot Imogene in Eden Park with a revolver. Remus then turned himself in and was indicted of first-degree murder. The trial gained national attention, as Americans could not resist the spectacle. Remus acted as his own co-counsel and used the defense strategy of insanity that he used in the William Cheney Ellis murder trial in 1914. As stated in The Bourbon King, the jury only took 19 minutes to deliver a verdict of not guilty on the sole ground of insanity. However, the judge of this trial commanded Remus to stay in a mental institution. Remus fought back from this and was discharged after 6 months in the Lima hospital. During this time, a new, more violent form of gangsters, like Al Capone, emerged who had a distaste for Remus. According to the Bourbon King, Remus's new nickname among the gangsters was Remus the Rat. From this, Remus was not able to continue his life of bootlegging and returned to Cincinnati, where he started money laundering schemes to regain his wealth. Later, he joined the real estate business in New York, but continued to return to underground life by attending dog races and gambling. The larger-than-life story of George Remus contains every aspect that Americans crave: humble beginnings, ambitious rise to the top with love affairs and danger along the way, a fall from grace, loss, revenge, murder, and a twist at the end. His controversial life has inspired books, blockbuster movies, television shows, and documentaries, because people are entertained by his lawless passion for wealth, never-ending enthusiasm for a better life, and his blind ambition or greed to create the most expansive illegal liquor empire the United States had ever seen. The fact that consumers can even buy George Remus distilled whiskey bourbon today speaks to the legacy he leaves behind.